on Kiwi.
You're listening to the Radio Wammo Breakfast, only on Kiwi.
Well, Billy T. James remains almost 20 years on from his death, one of New Zealand's best-loved characters. As recently as May this year, Billy T. was voted the greatest exponent of Kiwi humour by an overwhelming majority. A new book has just been released called Billy T. The Life and Times of Billy T. by Matt Elliott. And he joins us on the line this morning. Good morning to you, Matt.
Good morning, mate. How are you?
A comedian in past life as well, or still a comedian?
I haven't done much in the last few years, a couple of years, because I've just been so focused on doing the Billy book. Not much time for anything else.
Yeah, now a comedy historian is what they're calling you.
Yes, there are worse things to be called. I'll take that.
Yeah.
Probably the only one in the country.
Now this is not the first book on Billy T, of course. What makes this one different? Why have you written one about Billy T?
Well, it is actually the first biography on Billy, and it's great to actually be able to record not just Billy's life, but the role of other entertainers around him and what was happening in New Zealand at the time, and really put Billy in context, I suppose.
Has documenting Billy T's life prior to you writing this book, has it been difficult?
Well, it hasn't been done, so it's hard to say. But the timing has been right for doing it, I think, in terms of talking to people who were friends of Billy's and talking to his widow, people who are starting to get on in years and perhaps thinking about sharing their memories of Billy so that they can, as I say, record, what the great man's life was and what their relationships with him were.
Because we generally know about Billy T, the public man, but
yes.
Did he have a controversial private life?
No, he didn't, but he was just a very shy guy. And, we live in a culture today where everybody wants to be in the magazines every 5 minutes, even for the tiniest little thing. But Billy was never interested in that sort of thing, nor was his wife, Lynn. She was very media shy, and Billy was a shy guy off stage. So nothing controversial there, but it's just, there was that shyness and reticence.
Did he start off like comedians start these days? At local comedy bars, on weeknights, telling a few jokes, seeing what sort of audience reaction he gets?
Well, the scene was very different back then. He played in bands and had a good stock of jokes in his head, thousands of jokes, his friends say, and so he would punctuate some of the songs they were doing with jokes. And then he got a big break to work with the Maori Volcanics show band for 2 years overseas, playing UK and Germany and Bermuda, and he got to see, the top UK cabaret comics and the top comics on TV, people such as Tommy Cooper and those sorts of guys. And his focus went away from the music as such to comedy, and that's where he really got his grounding, because there wasn't really a lot of comedy happening in New Zealand, but he came back with a pretty prepared act, and there was no stopping him.
So it's one thing to focus on those UK comedians, but it's quite another thing to then try and convert that humour to very much of a local flavour here in New Zealand.
Oh, that's right, and that's what was one of his great skills. He came back with this briefcase full of jokes of things that he'd heard overseas, things like the Two Ronnies, and in his mischievous little way, gave them a New Zealand slant, and people just responded to it fantastically, because it was something which, even though it had overseas origins, it was New Zealand humour. He was putting a spin on it, and we hadn't, apart from Fred Dagg, hadn't really seen much of that.
Yeah. It must have been quite extraordinary as well to make the leap from live comedy to actually putting it on TV and being given a show to himself.
Yeah, that's right, because there weren't really Maori entertainers making it through to TV. Sir Howard had done TV, of course, and Ernie Leonard was involved with On the Mat, but for Billy to get his own show, that was a massive thing.
Yeah.
He did so well in Radio Times. Audiences just loved him and wanted more of him, so they made a bit of a transitional show into his early series of doing a very much a variety act, which is what Radio Times had been. But Billy just stood out because he was the ultimate entertainer in terms of having all the strings to his bow, a great singing voice, wonderful timing as a comedian and mimic, and thrown in a bit of artwork on the side.
Did you ever receive any flack at the time from the Māori community for taking the mickey out of, I suppose, bro culture and all that?
Yeah, well, he did in the mid-'80s. He started to get a bit of stick when, culturally and politically things were changing in New Zealand, and Maori culture was being brought into the mainstream more, and a few people tended to think that Billy was taking the mickey out of Maori culture, which he actually wasn't. It was the last thing he wanted to do. Billy never wanted to get offside with anybody, and he just wanted people to enjoy themselves and have a laugh. And he was just putting characters out there of things that he'd seen. Comedy is not pure fiction. Comedians base characters on people that they've seen and so on, and add a bit of exaggeration. And Billy was pretty hurt by the fact that people thought that he was denigrating them.
Was he taking the mickey out of himself at any point, or was it always other characters?
Oh no, well I think you're always taking the mickey out of yourself to an extent when you're a comedian on stage. If you can put yourself down and audiences respond to that, then you're able to, make other little jibes. But I think the starting point is always taking the mickey out of yourself. Yeah.
Most New Zealanders, when they think of Billy T, they think of the classic TV scenes of him with the black singlet, or wife beater as it was known at the time, and the yellow towel sort of around his neck.
Yeah.
But there was more to him than that, wasn't there?
Oh, there was. He was such a great mimic, and as I say, the all-round entertainer. I think people tend to forget just what a good singing voice he had too. I think he might have had early ambitions to be, a popular singer, but he just had so many other things that he could do. Yeah. He could
have easily been one of our tenors, do you think?
Oh, quite possibly. He probably had pretensions to that early on.
Yeah.
But if you look at, even his film role in Came a Hot Friday, that's just such a fantastic piece of work by Billy. And when people think of Came a Hot Friday, they think of Billy, but he's only in it for about 15 minutes in total in the movie, but absolutely just steals it.
And he died so young.
Yes,
extraordinary. 42.
Yeah.
And so therefore he was only around, really, comparatively, a very short time to make his mark, and yet his mark is still ingrained in the New Zealand psyche right now.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it, that he's had such an impact, that he's been dead nearly 20 years, and people are still so affectionate and fond of him. And you mention the name Billy T. James, and invariably people will, crack into a smile and mention, where did I get my bag, or, something like that. It's quite a legacy as a comedian to still be so loved after such a period.
Do you think, though, that legacy has overshadowed comedians who have been and gone and still around since then?
I think it's made it very hard for anybody to follow in his footsteps, particularly for Maori entertainers, because people are always talking about, finding the next Billy T, and the way they talk about bands being the next Beatles,
Because they'll see a comedian and go, oh, not as good as Billy T.
Yeah, it's hard, isn't it? Yeah, it's hard enough getting up on stage, but when you've got that hanging over as well. I think also because there has been a real absence of TV comedy in New Zealand in recent years, we are looking more for, something like Billy to be on TV, and people are looking back saying, well, what would Billy be doing at the moment?
Because it seemed so natural and it worked back then, doesn't it? And most things since a little bit awkward, kind of a little bit cringy, you kind of want to hide behind the couch when you watch it, sort of stuff.
Yeah, they had their own battles to get things on TV, but Billy was on a roll, and TV couldn't not put Billy on TV because he was so popular.
Yeah.
Because he was also working night after night after night live around the country, so he had that huge following, and when you put something on TV, you want it to be popular, and TV execs knew just how popular Billy was.
Yeah.
So they had a bit of free rein, which is different now.
You've also been able to add into the book photographs that we have never seen before.
Yes, I've got a few there. It was nice of old friends of Billy's to say, I've got this photo, or I've got this note that Billy sent to us, and just show some different photos, because we see photos of Billy in his comic persona all the time, so it's nice to put other little photos and bits of memorabilia in there. And also, one thing I really liked that I got from his widow was Billy's various promotional shots. So you see him as when he's first going solo, when he's just Billy James before the T's in there.
Where did the T? So the T is his middle name. It comes from his
Well,
middle name.
he's William James Tuwehi Taitoko.
Okay.
So he and Prince Tuiteka played around with that and came up with Billy T. James.
Yeah, just the ultimate show name, really, isn't it?
Oh, it's great, isn't it?
Yeah. And so you found those promotional shots and other interesting photos from his widow, from his family.
From his widow and from friends. There's an old friend of his from the Maori Boys Hostel where Billy was for a few years here in Auckland, and nice photo of the boys playing up a bit in the hostel, and here photos of Billy when he was taken to the States to try out for TV in America by his agents, and his attraction to big American cars and on the side of the road with cops, just things which I think came into Billy's comedy and with features of his life as well, and just to show a different side of him. Yeah.
Great. Well, the book is out now, Billy T, The Life and Times of Billy T. James by Matt Elliott. Matt, thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you, mate. Thanks.